morning. He can't ignore the court. That's the view of the lawyer for the woman taking Prince Andrew to court over allegations of sexual assault. We've spoken to him about that lawsuit. Prince Andrew has repeatedly denied all of the allegations against him, while Miss Giuffre's lawyer has accused the Prince and his legal team of stonewalling. The documents allege that Prince Andrew's actions described above constitute extreme and outrageous conduct that shocks the conscience. Prince Andrew's sexual abuse of a child who he knew was a sex trafficking victim, and when he was approximately 40 years old, goes beyond all possible bounds of decency and is intolerable in a civilised community. Our royal correspondent spoke with Virginia Giuffre's legal counsel, David Boyce.
How convinced are you that you will finally get Prince Andrew to speak in the manner in which you want him to answer those questions?
Prince Andrew is going to have to now speak. He can't ignore court process. He can ignore me, he can ignore my client, he can ignore other victims and their lawyers, but he can't ignore the court. The court process now is going to compel him. If he were to try to ignore the court the way he's ignored us, there would be a default judgment entered against him. We've reached out to Prince Andrew's legal team a number of times over the last 5 years. We've made an attempt to engage with him, to give him an opportunity to tell his side of the story, to provide any explanation or context that he might have for his actions, to try to resolve this without the necessity of litigation. Every such effort has been rebuffed. They have totally stonewalled us, just like they've stonewalled the criminal prosecutors in the United States.
So what happens next? We're going to be talking about that throughout the course of the programme for you. This morning, we believe the Prince, along with his ex-wife, is now holidaying with his mother. Interesting conversation, I'm sure. The Metro has a picture of Prince Andrew and says the development is enough to make a Duke sweat, a reference to the defence Prince Andrew gave during one interview. There he is, photographed yesterday. Downfall of the Duke, asks the Daily Mail. It says Prince Andrew stays silent after Miss Giuffre's civil case was filed in New York. To Algeria now, where wildfires are burning. 42 people have been killed by wildfires in Algeria. It included 25 soldiers who were helping fight the blaze. The president of Algeria described them as martyrs who had helped save 100 people.
We have 3 deaths here and 4 in the village. The hospital is full. I can't tell you if we are beating the fire, but we are fighting it with all that we have, and may God help us. We are putting out the fire. We are doing all that we can. May God help us to stop it.
Well, still to come on the programme. For you, 7:30, we'll ask the Shadow Minister for the Armed Forces, that's Stephen Morgan, how the government should handle the hunger strike by former Gurkha soldiers. Australia is about to introduce some of the world's strictest travel laws and lockdown restrictions. We'll talk to one NHS doctor who fears he might not be allowed to leave and come back to Britain. That's at 8:20. And the world's best-known footballer, Lionel Messi, I'm just wondering whether he is the world's best-known footballer. Anyway, that's what we're saying this morning. Lionel Messi has completed a multi-million-pound move to Paris Saint-Germain. We'll discuss the deal with former England and Liverpool footballer John Barnes, and that is at 8:40. Is it Messi or is it Ronaldo? You've probably got a view on that, haven't you? You can tweet me directly if you would like to, at Kay Burley. Meantime, let's tell you about that group of Gurkhas who are continuing their hunger strike on the streets of Westminster in protest against their military pensions. They're campaigning against receiving a lower payment than soldiers from the rest of the army. Here's what a spokesperson for the Ministry of Defence has told us. We greatly value the huge contribution Gurkhas make to the British Army and ensure they are supported with a generous pension and medical care during retirement in Nepal. We are committed to ensuring the Gurkha pension scheme is sustainable and fair alongside other UK public sector pensions. Well, yesterday we heard from the Gurkhas as well as the Education Secretary and the former Defence Secretary, Gavin Williamson.
As a former veteran himself, I know that Ben puts an enormous value on this. We put an enormous value in terms of Gurkha Regiment. That's why it's been, expanded and grown in recent years, because we recognise their sort of unfailing loyalty, their unfailing commitment.
We are fighting for equal right. If there is equal, we will not fight. If there is no discrimination, we will not fight. Pay, pension, family permission, everything. That is the discrimination. That is against the human right.
Well, our correspondent Jemima Walker is outside the protest at Westminster and she is with us now. Jemima, very good morning to you. This is what, day 7?
Day 5. So the Gurkhas have spent 4 nights outside here. This is the 5th day of their hunger strike. And as you can imagine, they are feeling quite weary. 2 of the women here have received some medical assistance overnight, but considering that they haven't eaten this is the 5th day now, they are in remarkably good spirits, I would say. I had a quick chat with some of them this morning. I'll move out of the way a little bit, Kay, so you can see what is going on. So just to remind you, the Gurkhas who we were speaking about this morning retired before 1997, and essentially their pension scheme was calculated based on the assumption they returned to Nepal. In 2009, they were allowed to settle in the UK. They say their pensions have not met, the equivalent that their British counterparts get paid, and that is what they are fighting for. They say they have served in the British Army and they deserve equal pensions.
Yeah, and we can... I think that's Dan, actually.
Yes, sorry, I'll just remind you, Kay, of what... Yes, who you spoke to yesterday, and I think you're going to speak to him a little bit later today. So they want equal rights, but the government say they do completely appreciate the work that the Gurkhas have done, and they make sure that they get paid a fair pension.
Indeed so. And just talk to me about what happened yesterday, Jemima, because they did have some sort of flimsy tents to protect them from the inclement weather, didn't they? But the police have said that that needs to go.
Yeah, that's right. There were some sort of gazebos put up here where the Gurkhas have positioned themselves. The police said that there is a bylaw which means that gazebos, for example, aren't allowed. Last night they had some umbrellas up. They say that they were asked to put them down as well. So they are fighting against the weather, and they are, that they're really trying their best to stay here, to keep warm, to keep safe. But as I say, this is day 5 of them not eating. They've spent 4 nights outside. But, we will hopefully be hearing more from the government in the coming weeks on this.
Yeah, I think the confusion with the number of days they've been on hunger strike, Jemima, is because they had started it on a different day to start with, and it was a rollover hunger strike. So not everybody was on strike at the same time. But now these gentlemen that are there have said that they're not going to eat at all. They're there until they either get what they want or they perish. Is that right?
Exactly. That is what they are saying. They say they told you yesterday on the show, I think, Kay, that they are willing to stay here and continue striking. They continue the hunger strike to death. So this is not for them ending until they see what they view as equal pay. OK,
Jemima, for now, thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. And it's literally across the road from Downing Street. We did approach the Ministry of Defence for an interview on the Gurkhas yesterday, but we're told that they won't be able to facilitate an interview with a minister. Now, a Cardiff man who had to bury his unvaccinated mother, father and brother after they died with COVID-19 says it's absolutely vital people get their jab against the virus. Francis Gonzalez has just returned to Wales after flying out to Portugal, where his family relocated to a few years ago. He says his family had been misled by anti-vax propaganda on the internet. He spoke to our correspondent, Dan Whitehead.
I didn't expect to lose one, let alone all 3. You always think at least one will get through.
Francis Gonçalves has just had to bury his mother, father and brother. They were unvaccinated and all died with COVID-19 in the space of 1 week last month. His 40-year-old brother Shaul was the first to pass.
His heart failed in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. I can't even explain the feeling. After that, honestly, I felt like I was the one that was dead.
3 days later, his father Basil died. Francis managed to land in Portugal as his mother was rushed to hospital.
When they eventually took me through, they cladded me up in PPE, took me through to the ward, and I realised she was in a far worse state that they were letting me know. And then at about 7:45, I received a phone call. There is nothing that can ever prepare you for that. The funeral process was difficult, particularly when you're signing off for 3 coffins, 3 sets of flower arrangements, and you see that all coming down in 3 different hearses when you're at the cemetery.
Francis says his family were against the vaccine and had been misled by conspiracies online.
They were afraid. They had a lot of information that had been passed through the internet, and you can call it misinformation. I think disinformation is probably more appropriate. It's deliberately misleading people to the point of it being propaganda. And if you don't trust the government, if you don't trust what you see on TV or social media, go to your doctor, because they will give you the best information you have.
In your mind, how vital is it to have the vaccine?
Absolutely vital. If they all had the vaccine, I do believe I would have at least one of them here with me today.
His unimaginable loss, a reminder that this virus is still present.
The memories make it easier because they were the good times, they were the happy times. You do miss those times, and there should have been more of them.
Dan Whitehead, Sky News, in Cardiff.
Meanwhile, Facebook has removed hundreds of accounts it says were involved in anti-vax disinformation campaigns. The firm claims the accounts were operated from somewhere in Russia. In a statement, Facebook said the pages were aiming to recruit influencers to spread false claims on COVID-19 vaccines, especially those produced by Pfizer and AstraZeneca. One of the UK's most senior scientists has cast doubt on the need for everyone to be given a COVID vaccine booster. The Health Secretary has said the government is drawing up plans for extra shots from probably next month. But Professor Sir Andrew Pollard, who helped develop the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, told MPs that booster jabs shouldn't be necessary.
At this moment, those doses that are available that could be used for boosting or for childhood programmes are much better deployed for people who will die over the next 6 months, rather than that very unlikely scenario of a sudden collapse in the programmes in countries that are highly vaccinated.
We'll be talking about that with a GP later on in the programme for you, looking at the figures. Another 32,250 first vaccine doses given yesterday, while another 137,000 people received their second. Almost 40 million people are now fully vaccinated. That's more than 3/4 of all adults in the UK. There have been a further 23,500 new cases, 2,000 fewer than Monday. A further 146 people have sadly died. That takes the total number of people who've died within 28 days of a positive test to 130,503. Well, vaccines are continuing to weaken the link between cases, hospitalisations and deaths. The proportion of infected people admitted to hospital has now roughly halved compared to the same point in the second wave. And deaths relative to cases are now around 9 times lower. The nationwide infection rate now stands at 277 cases per 100,000, virtually unchanged from a week ago. Lincoln has the highest rate in the UK at 648 cases per 100,000. The lowest figures on mainland Britain can be found in Ceredigion in Wales with 77 cases per 100,000. And Australia has introduced a ban stopping almost everyone, including foreigners, from leaving the country. The country's two largest cities, Sydney and Melbourne, have been in lockdown as the number of new cases of COVID-19 continues to rise. Well, Sky News Australia reporter Danica De Giorgio joins us now from Sydney. Hello to you. Thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. So the government is saying people can't leave the country.
Yeah, it's extraordinary new rules that have come into force from today. Essentially, any Australian who is based overseas and comes to Australia, even just for a visit, well, they now need to be granted permission to leave. Now, ordinarily, if you were leaving to go back overseas, you'd simply just have to show your passport at the airport and off you go. But it's now designed to close a loophole to stop Australians based overseas from coming back for a visit, particularly given in the last few months the international arrivals cap has been halved due to Delta outbreak strains like we're currently seeing in parts of Sydney, but also to reduce pressure on the hotel quarantine system. It's taken many by surprise. Some Australians based overseas have told Sky News they don't even know whether or not they'll be able to return to the country that they live in. Is it legal? Yes, it is. Nobody can challenge the health minister's direction. And even under international laws, Australia doesn't have a Bill of Rights, meaning that no citizen can actually challenge this decision.
Wow. Fascinating stuff. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot for joining us on the programme this morning. We will be speaking to an NHS doctor who went down to Australia to see family. Can he not come back home now? We'll talk about that with him later on in the show. Meantime, hundreds of buildings have now been destroyed by the largest wildfire in California's history. The Dixie Fire has destroyed around 500,000 acres of land as it's been burning for nearly a month in the state's northern forestlands. Sky's Mark Stone has the latest for us from Taylorsville, which is in California.
We'll have a look at this, such a visual example of just how fast this fire can move. We're on the Diamond Mountain Road just outside the town of Taylorsville here in Northern California. This fire has been burning on so many fronts for so long. And just yesterday afternoon, we were here and this building was completely intact. It's someone's home. There was no sense that it was in any immediate danger. Behind the building, you can see the trees there. And behind that, maybe a kilometre or so, the hillside sweeps up and it's quite a steep mountain. And that's where the fire was yesterday. We could see the firefighters trying to control it, both on the ground. They were up as close as they can get, and it's very dangerous work. These are not small flames. They're flames that lick the side of these very, very tall pine trees, so it's hard for them to get close. They were also trying to fight the fires using helicopters as well, something they can't do now because the visibility is so low. And yet overnight they didn't manage to be able to contain it, and it swept down into the valley here and took out that home and also a barn, a hay barn that was that you can see just there. So very, very difficult work, and some of the numbers are really striking. This is a fire that's now been going for nearly a month. That's how long they have been trying to fight it. It's only 25% contained. We're talking about 500,000 acres of land that is or has been burnt as the fire has progressed. And another figure that I think is really striking is the span of the wildfire season, which at the moment is about 70 plus days longer than it was just a few years ago. So there's no question, even among locals here, some of whom might deny or question climate change as a human phenomenon, but certainly they do believe the climate is changing. The weather, the summers are getting hotter, the winters are less cold. And there are other questions too, local questions, just about how the forest is managed and about clearing the forest management. And we'll leave you with the image you can see there, these familiar green fire engines that are sweeping around the country, this country, as they try to continue to put these fires out.
And of course, Mark will continue to monitor events for us there. Meantime, we're going to return to our top story now, staying in America, actually, the lawsuit filed against Prince Andrew. Joining us is author of Conversations with the Prince, Angela Levin. Hello to you, Angela. It's good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us. We believe that Andrew and Fergie have gone to spend some time with Her Majesty. One wonders what sort of discussions will be being had behind closed doors.
I think it's a very difficult situation, isn't it? I mean, Fergie will be very, very pro-Andrew and upbeat, and of course delighted that she's been invited to stay in Balmoral for the first time in many, many years, because the late Duke of Edinburgh couldn't stand her around, so she's not been there. So that's a big change this year. I think the Queen will listen very carefully and not say too much at this stage, because she's very cautious about things, and I don't think she will jump in and say what she wants to say. I think that they'll wait until they've had advice from the lawyers. Royal lawyers are very good, very thorough, and I think there won't be any comment until they've actually got that. But it will spoil it for her, I'm quite sure, because Andrew is her favourite child. And this is her first time without her husband of over 70 years. So it should have been a sort of occasion where the family are together and positive. And this will be hanging over like a dark cloud, I suspect.
Yeah, apparently he's taken the dog up there as well in a different vehicle, so he's obviously planning to stay there for a while, but he does only have something like 21 days, I believe, to answer these allegations that have been laid down in the New York court, allegations that he denies.
Yes, it's 21 days, so he has to say something. He's put off saying things for a long time, and if he doesn't, they can actually come to a decision about the allegations, and I don't think that anybody would want that. So they have to make a very quick, thorough job to decide how to manage this. There is, of course, several ways which lawyers know, which I don't, of pushing back law cases with all sorts of comments and questions and statements, so that it can linger for a long time. But these 21 days are very, very important.
Yeah, but, you know, it's 21 days that they have been preparing for a very long time, to the extent where Prince Andrew has already stepped back from public duties, hasn't he?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that. There's a lot of voices in the background.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, OK, I will say it again. I'm so sorry, Angela. The point I was making was that he does only have 21 days now to reply by his lawyers, presumably, but he has had several years when he's known the allegations against him, to the extent that he's already stepped back from public life.
Yeah, so I think that the Queen actually and Prince Charles and Prince William did take away all his charities from him, because they feared that this could happen in the end. And so he's really a bit like a prisoner in a gilded cage at the moment. And he did try to come back after the Duke of Edinburgh's death. He did give a talk to the press and was very fulsome. And I thought it was alleged to me that he was trying to carve his way back, but that's absolutely not possible. They can't have that under any circumstances. So nor can he really go out the country, because wherever he lands, the FBI could come along and take him to New York. So his love of golf, particularly in America, has to stay quiet for a while.
Yeah, be curtailed at least for now, as we say, just for the lawyer's benefit. He, of course, does say that all of these charges, allegations against him are completely false. While I've just got you there, I wondered if I could move on to a different subject, which you will also know much about. Angela, given that you are totally tuned in to everything that's happening with the royals, Harry and Meghan, they were absent from Barack Obama's 60th birthday party. There were bezies before. What's happened?
Well, I think that's very significant. But they were not only kept out of the 70 that Obama had to have because of the COVID problem, but he'd actually invited 600 originally, and they weren't there. my own feeling is that they are more wary of the couple. And we know that they both love the Queen, they love the royal family. And I think that they feel that family comes first. And you can have a big row, you can actually let off a bit of steam, but I don't think you go on and on and on criticising the British monarchy, criticising a 95-year-old grandmother who's actually the Queen and one of the most respected women all around the world, and your father and your brother. I think that they're wary and have stepped back. I don't think they'll desert Harry because Obama really, really likes him. He played a great joking game in 2016 with the Queen over Invictus Games, pretending they were furious that England could win and England was furious that America could win. And it was a wonderful little video. And he's felt very sorry for Harry and very caring about him, and Michelle too. But she did say that at the very beginning, when she and Meghan had a talk, that women have to understand when they marry somebody who's very well known in a very strong position that they can't have it all as it happens. You have to step back, perhaps on your career, and not try and do everything at once. And then later on, you can come back and get it going up and running again. And I think she must be quite shocked at how they are behaving.
Okay. Fascinating stuff, Angela, as always. I'm sure we'll speak to you again over the next 3 weeks. It's good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me tell you about a group of men claiming to represent Mexico's most powerful drug cartel. They've threatened to kill one of the country's best-known television presenters. Goodness. The gangsters say that Milenio Television Network was favouring groups that are battling the cartel. What about this? Alpaca cam live. Yep. Geronimo is to have a camera fitted in his pen. He doesn't look pleased about it, does he? So supporters can keep a constant watch on his safety. According to the Sun newspaper, the owner, Helen McDonald, on this show just yesterday, says she wants people to be able to watch Geronimo 24/7. He'll have 1 million eyes on him all day. Every day is what she says. The animal is due to be put down by DEFRA after testing positive twice for bovine TB. One of the world's best footballers, Lionel Messi, has completed his move to Paris Saint-Germain. Until now, the 24-year-old had spent his entire career at Spanish side Barcelona. He's reported to have signed a 2-year deal worth £25 million per year after tax plus bonuses, which is nice. The former England and Liverpool legend John Barnes will discuss that multi-million-pound deal with us at 8:40 this morning. Now, live music is back after the pandemic, it seems. And I can tell you that one of Britain's biggest selling pop stars is going back on stage. Ed Sheeran has announced that he will play what he's calling an intimate gig next month at the Shepherd's Bush Empire, his first UK event since 2019. If you go onto his Instagram feed, because I already have, it shows you how you can register to potentially get those tickets. Meantime, the O2 Arena in London held its first full-capacity event since the lockdown began last night. Damon Albarn's Gorillas performed to a crowd of around 20,000. The audience was mainly NHS workers and their family as a special thank you concert. Now then, what's happening as far... Hopefully we'll be able to listen to a little bit of Ed Sheeran later on in the programme. But what about the weather? Let's listen to Naz now. Good morning, Naz.
Good morning. Well, after a mostly fine day yesterday, it's the return of rain once again for some areas today. So let's take a look at the details.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. So, after a mostly fine and largely dry day across much of the UK and Ireland yesterday, today sees the return of rain from the northwest again. In fact, this morning there are spells of rain with some pretty heavy downpours across parts of Ireland, Northern Ireland, edging into western parts of Scotland. It's also rather grey start to the day across northern and western parts of England and Wales, with some patchy light rain and drizzle across these areas. Whereas further south and east of England and eastern parts of Scotland, some central areas of Scotland too, it's a mainly dry and sunny morning, but not for long, because that band of rain will be heading its way eastwards with blustery conditions and still some heavy downpours across most of Scotland this afternoon. To northern and western parts of England and Wales, the rain more patchy and light in nature, and perhaps becoming cloudy with some patchy light rain across parts of the Midlands, particularly the West Midlands. In turn, it becomes dry and brighter by around midday across Ireland and Northern Ireland. Then later, western parts of Scotland will brighten up. In fact, eventually that rain with some heavy downpours will become confined to the north and east of Scotland, and most of that rain becoming lighter and patchy in nature across northern and western parts of England and Wales. For central, southern and eastern parts of England, fine for today. We continue with the sunny weather, particularly down towards the southeast where the highest temperatures are likely. It will be feeling warm.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, just when the people of Ireland thought it was safe to go back into the water this summer, Wally, the walrus, yep, him again, he was filmed driving a speedboat, well, sort of, near Clonakilty in Cork. The speed demon can clearly be seen going from 0 to 100. About on his journey around the lake without a care in the world. In fact, just 5 days ago, he caused disruption in Ardmore, and people on the Scilly Isles built a pontoon to stop him causing damage to boats there. Completely nonplussed about it, decided to go to County Cork instead. Who knows where he might turn up next? If you've got pictures of him, do please send them to us here at Sky News, or you can tweet me directly at Kay Burley. Now let's get more on that ongoing hunger strike against army pensions by a group of former Gurkha soldiers. This week, we've been asking cabinet ministers and shadow ministers whether the current payment system needs to change.
I think that Gurkhas are fantastic soldiers. They've had a unique contribution to British history and our military. And I think that it's very sad if they feel that they've been treated in this way. I mean, clearly, I've just heard of the story now, and I'd like to look.
On Friday, we had one of them on the programme. I mean, the point is, do you think it should be looked at? Surely,
everything. Yeah, of course,
70-year-olds starving themselves to death.
Of course, it should be. I mean, for them to have come to a point where this is the decision that they've taken and they want to pursue this path, of course, that should be looked at.
As a former veteran himself, I know that Ben puts an enormous value on this. We put an enormous value in terms of Gurkha regiment. That's why it's been, expanded and grown in recent years, because we recognise their sort of unfailing loyalty, their unfailing commitment. That's why we made changes to the pension regime in the past, and that's why all these matters are always kept under review.
Well, let's speak to Stephen Morgan, Shadow Defence Minister for the Armed Forces. Hello to you, Mr Morgan. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. Can you explain to us why Gurkhas are given a different pension?
Well, good morning, Kane. It's really good to see you. I'm really concerned about this issue. Gurkhas, as we've already heard, have served our country for 200 years, and I think that they deserve the most respect possible for their service to our country. They wear the flag on the uniform for ceremony, they wear their flag in combat, but I think it's outrageous that the inequality continues. Government promised 2 years ago to do something about this. 5 years ago, they promised to work with the government of Nepal to take action, and we've still not heard anything. So we're calling for action now by government. I think it's outrageous that there are people on the streets of number 10 that are sleeping out there and not eating, and we need to take action.
So what do you propose? What's the opposition going to do?
Well, the first thing we're doing is actually listening and engaging. And I think Ben Wallace is looking out of his window but not going out there to talk to those that are on hunger strike. That's the least a government can do. But we do need to see action. I've had the privilege of meeting some of our Gurkhas, the Royal Gurkha Rifles, some time ago. I will be going to see them too. But we do need to see action on this issue. I don't know why the government are dragging their heels. But again, this is another example of the government talking the talk, but not walking the walk in supporting our armed forces, veterans and their families.
I'm not sure why Gurkhas continue to fall through the cracks. I mean, when Labour was in power, you failed to back them as a party, and they eventually did manage to get some increase in their pensions. They still want more. What is it about the Gurkhas? Why do they not get the support that they should be getting, that they feel they should be getting?
Well, you're right to raise those issues, but Kay, Labour and government did deliver a fairer pension scheme, and we provide the right for all Gurkhas to settle in the UK. But I mean, I joined politics to fight the injustice that those that served our country, and Gurkhas that are doing this protest right now should know that I'm supporting them every step of the way, and will be writing to Ben Wallace today to end this injustice.
Yeah, if they do die on the streets of Whitehall, which they say that they will, unless they are listened to, what does that say about the British state?
I think that shows a huge stain on society for all of us. And I think the government have got to listen. Ben Wallace needs to look out of his window, get down there, the 10 metres that it is, and go and see these and actually find a solution once and for all.
We've heard that the government is looking again at this issue and could take further action in the coming weeks. What would you support? What would you like that to look like?
Well, we know pensions are a complex issue and we need to work cross-party to find a solution. I've already spoken to Pete Kyle, who you spoke to yesterday, and I thank you, Kay, for raising these issues. It shouldn't be a party political issue. Yes, there are technicalities that need to be addressed, but the fact that the government committed 2 years ago to sort this and they still haven't done so, I think requires real action, a report to Parliament on the progress that they made. But ultimately, the government need to listen and engage with those protesting.
Mr Morgan, we have got a letter from former Defence Minister Kevin Jones. This was in 2010, as we know, and the proposition that Gurkhas of earlier generations are less well treated has been entirely rejected, and we will continue to honour and reward their commitment and sacrifice through the existing arrangement. And it's not the case that the equalisation of the pension would benefit the majority of Gurkhas. So, you know, as I was pointing out, they are a group of people that do seem to fall through the cracks, whoever's in power.
I think you're right, and I mean, we're now 11 years on since that quote was made. If I read you, Kay, an email that I've had, which has motivated me to help, this person said to me, I've always viewed Britain as a fair and just society, so I'm shocked that Gurkhas are treated so poorly and feel it is a national disgrace that they've been treated so badly and they've resorted to risking their lives by going on a hunger strike. I mean, I think that should motivate all parliamentarians to take action on this issue, and rest assured I will do so.
So where do we go from here, Mr Morgan?
Well, I'm going to be listening, engaging. I'll be writing to Ben Wallace today about the issues that have been raised.
OK. Are you going to go down and see the Gurkhas?
I plan to, yes. I've already been in correspondence with them, but will continue to engage to the best of my abilities.
OK. It's good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you. Tamara's here. Tamara, we've been talking about this throughout the course of the week, haven't we? It's not going away for the government.
Morning, Kay. No, it isn't going away. And I think he hit on something important there when you asked him about Labour not supporting the Gurkhas in 2010. And the key thing that's changed since then is, of course, following that high-profile campaign involving Joanna Lumley, thousands of Gurkhas and their families came and settled in the UK who'd retired before 1997. Their pension scheme was suited to them retiring in Nepal, and the government pointed out that they could get it after 15 years service rather than British veterans who had to wait a lot longer. So they believed that was fair. But now that many of those veterans live in the UK, many of them, as we heard on Whitehall yesterday, living on very poor incomes, some as little as £165 a month, they told us, from their pension schemes, they now believe that needs to be revisited. And clearly the government think that as well, because despite the Gurkhas losing a number of court cases against the government over the years, 2 years ago, the government gave them an increase in their pension scheme in recognition that this was an issue, and now they're consulting on making further changes to that pension scheme. So they know that there is an unfairness that the Gurkhas are claiming. The government do insist that the scheme is fair, but clearly they are looking at some aspects of it.
Whatever the merits, the optics are terrible if there are people lying on the street threatening to starve themselves to the death within spitting distance of Parliament, of the corridors of power, and they're not going out to see them.
Of course, that is absolutely right, and this is
this shows that some of these people are in a really, really desperate situation financially, they say, as a result of this pension scheme. There was actually a hunger strike by some Gurkhas back in 2012, and after it went on for a few days, the government did engage with them and did start talking to them. And if this is to continue, I think they're now in their 5th day only drinking water, I would be surprised if some officials didn't start to talk to them at some stage.
OK, Tamara Fenner, thanks very much indeed. More on that with Tamara's take just after 9 o'clock this morning. Meantime, let's take you to the United States. The most senior politician in New York, the governor, Andrew Cuomo, has resigned following weeks of allegations of sexual harassment. An official investigation last week concluded he had groped, kissed or made suggestive comments to 11 separate women. His former executive assistant, Brittany Commisso, waived her right to anonymity and spoke publicly about what happened. Yesterday, as he announced his departure, Mr. Cuomo gave this explanation of his behaviour.
In my mind, I've never crossed the line with anyone. But I didn't realize the extent to which the line has been redrawn.
He groped me, he touched me, not only once, but twice. And I don't think that had happened to any of the other women, the touching.
I respect the governor's decision, and I respect the decision he made.
Lucky to have US political commentator and journalist Scotty Nell Hughes on the programme with us this morning. Hello to you, Scotty. Good to see you. We heard from Joe Biden there last week. He said that he thought that the governor should go. Was that his death knell?
Well, I don't know about that. President Biden wasn't the only Democrat. But, Kay, you just heard those sound bites. I mean, that was one of the most cringy apologies, I think, and resignation speeches that in American history. And that was one of the things that Republicans or Democrats probably agreed upon most, more than the infrastructure bill that they passed yesterday, that it was time for Governor Cuomo to go, regardless of the 10 years of work that even Democrats tried to justify as being good. The last year had been nothing but damage control for Democrats trying to figure out what exactly they were going to do as more and more women, up to almost a dozen, continued to come out with these stories, and they were all saying the same things. And the apology yesterday, Kay, that was far from an apology. It was almost like a justification in his mind. And for a man who 10 years in politics is supposed to represent all the people of New York, to say that line, he did not realize it was blurred, it was insulting to not only women, but it was also insulting to those of Italian descent, saying this was just a part of the culture. There were so many things that I think Democrats realized yesterday was wrong with this governor and his perception of the people, that I think, like I said, I don't know who was toasting or opening up the champagne bottles more to see Governor Cuomo leave, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, because it was definitely a nightmare for both parties in having him in office.
How damaging is it for the party, though, the Democratic Party? Because we did see what happened with Donald Trump when the sexual allegations were made against him. That didn't ultimately seem to damage either him personally or indeed the Republican Party.
Well, that was the one thing. That was the difference between Donald Trump and Governor Cuomo. In this case, Cuomo's accusations were coming from his own party, from within. And that was also on top of all of the studies and all of the investigations going on right now, Kay, involving the nursing home scandals and how he handled COVID. You know, the same thing that he got a $5 million book advance and has got an Emmy Award for. We're actually coming to find out that he made some very critical, bad decisions that other governors followed, and putting people that were positive for COVID back into high-risk situations. That investigation is ongoing. Lots of other issues that are happening on top of this. So, yes, the Democrats, I think they'd be very happy to see Governor Cuomo disappear and fade into the sunset. But if Republicans are smart, they will keep this as a reminder to the general public as to what some of the policies, not necessarily the women, because I think across the board we can all say that what he did to women was wrong, especially those within his office, but also the policies that he made, that those actually caused deaths here in the United States, caused deaths in New York. And considering he was the gold standard, as Joe Biden defined him last year during the pandemic, other governors followed his rule, and unfortunately, people died as a result.
Talk to me about whether, I mean, he's only just gone, but one wonders in the fullness of time whether he might be able to return. He has a famous father, of course, and an even more famous brother.
Well, I think actually the time for Governor Cuomo is done. And yes, he did offer apologies to his daughters, but there's obviously a lot of different issues involved here. And I think that you realize that the reason why he actually, and he made this quite clear during his apology resignation yesterday, he wasn't apologizing for his actions, because he really did not see much remorse in it. He was apologizing because he realized that his party had left him and they were no longer going to support him. And that is one thing that the Democratic Party does. Once they're done with you, just ask Al Gore, they're done with you and you fade off into the sunset to write a book or maybe have a Netflix series, but you will never be seen from in politics again. And I think that is where the same fate will be if you do not see a criminal investigation or some sort of prosecution actually go into Governor Cuomo, into both the actions from COVID, but also with the 12 women and their accusations.
Scotty, it's great to see you. Thanks for staying up for us. Always appreciated. Thanks a lot. Now, the environmental campaigner Greta Thunberg has revealed that she hasn't bought any new clothes for at least 3 years. Goodness. The 18-year-old was speaking after she was photographed as the cover star for the first ever edition of the magazine Vogue Scandinavia. She told them that the last clothes she bought were actually second-hand, which looks great, and she warned that mass-produced fashion at the moment was not sustainable. He agrees. Let's look at the impact of climate change on the planet. Top line of our dashboard, have a look, shows how the UK's power is produced, and you can see how much warmer the Earth is now than in 1880 when modern record keeping began. That's the second line. Then the figure to how long scientists believe it will take to reach the plus 1.5 degrees Celsius figure seen by many as a point of no return for the planet. 11 years is what they're predicting. And finally, a huge and frightening statistic, the total amount of CO2 emissions in millions of tonnes. No, despite intense campaigning, a plane, I should say, has taken off for Jamaica, deporting an unknown number of people to the island. Protesters claim many of them were brought up here since they were children and regard Britain as their home. Well, joining us now is Karen Doyle, founding member of Movement for Justice, which campaigns for immigrant rights. Hello to you. Thanks for joining us. Do you know who was on the plane at this stage?
Over the course of the last 2 weeks, we've been talking to 30 detainees who are at risk of being on the flight. Of those 30, only 4 people were on the plane. So I only know those 4 people. There will be other people on the plane who were not in touch with us, who wanted to return, accepted a voluntary return.
OK, so how did we manage to reduce from 30 to just 4?
Intense campaigning, as you said, but also the majority of those who had their tickets cancelled had valid human rights claims or other claims as to why they should not be put on that flight. And one of the reasons we do campaign is because by the very operation of these flights, they prevent people accessing legal advice and the justice that they need to prove their cases. Combined with legal aid cuts, people have not been able to present the needs of their children and the voices of their children or expert evidence that's needed to kind of prove their case. So it's been 2 weeks of intensively making sure that everyone has what they need to make their case.
The government would say in response that the people, many of the people that were, they wanted to be on this aeroplane had committed a crime. Is it not right for them to be asked to leave?
It's a very simplistic way of looking at human beings. All of the people on the plane have committed a crime. All of them have served time for that crime that a judge thought was just for that crime. Many of them have been out of prison for many years, not committing any further offences. A whole number were for non-violent offences. A number, well, actually, I'm happy to say all of the people who came as children that we were in touch with were not on the plane. But there were people who were at risk of being on the plane who'd been groomed into criminal activity from a young age, who'd been here since 3 months old, 2 years old, 5 years old, who were more British than Jamaican. And so while the law says if you commit a crime of 12 months or more, you should be deported, the reality is very different in terms of the lives that people have and the cases that people have.
Talk to me, if you would, quickly about what's going to happen to those 26 people that have been taken off the aeroplane.
They are, for the most part, bar one that I know of, they are still in the detention centre. For some of them, they were taken off the plane because of an injunction. For others, there was no reason given. They were just taken off the plane. So they are going to have to go through a process of making their case in the courts and applying for bail to get out of detention centres.